Hi, everyone. Welcome to our graduation event for the second cohort of MCC Code School. I'll go ahead and get this started. We're so happy to have you all here tonight and celebrate our 8 graduating students along with our industry partner, Mutual of Omaha, and all of our instructors tonight. My name is Kim Bridges. I'm the project manager for MCC Code School. Just a few items before we get started. I did hit the record button, so this is being recorded. We ask that you do keep your mic muted if you're not speaking, but if you do want to say something, feel free to unmute your mic and talk away. If you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or we will allow time at the end for questions, so feel free to ask away at the end. Our first speaker tonight is Colin Baldwin. He's the Director of Workforce and IT Innovation for Corporate Training at MCC in the Workforce Innovation Division. So please welcome Colin.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Kim. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right, and welcome, obviously, this evening. I promise that I will keep my subjectively inspirational words brief, to allow us to get on to the more important matters of the evening. But yes, it is a great pleasure to have an opportunity to share in this accomplishment with everybody. And welcome you all to the MCC Code School commencement. This really is not the end of anything. This truly is a beginning of something for everyone. And along with the faculty, the corporate trainers, the staff, the corporate partners, I extend my warmest congratulations to everyone here this evening, acknowledge the support that has helped you along the way. Any family and friends, colleagues that are either with us or that are at home, thank you, and I encourage you to thank them for their encouragement that they've offered, and in many cases for the sacrifices that they have made, so these aspiring minds could earn this honor. You have shown us that you challenge boundaries, break out of them, and redefine them. You are always connected, and you use that connectivity to change things for the better, and you are intrinsically now a part of the global community if you weren't before. Today is a moment to reflect on how you spent your time here as the world has changed around us, to truly celebrate your engagement with facts, opinions, and interpretation in all that you do. Today is a day to acknowledge and celebrate your unwavering commitment to advance the causes and the knowledge that matter most in this time, and to you. As you reflect on your time during Code School, on all that you have done here, on the learning, the leading in which you have engaged, my hope is that you will carry these experiences with you wherever you go. That, shaped by this education and your own values, inspired by others in your sphere of influence, you will know great happiness and see progress in your endeavors, and that you will continue to be a force for good in the world. Again, my sincere congratulations. Thank you for allowing me to share this opportunity in this evening with you all, and I very much look forward to the presentations this evening. Thank you.
And I think that's my cue. So good evening, welcome, hello, all of you. I saw you Tuesday for your rehearsal. It was phenomenal, so impressive. So I'm Dawn Nizzi, Manager of Business Development, Training and Outreach for the Workforce Innovation Division. Welcome all of our guests. It's great to be here. Just a few words about our business partner. I'm going to start with a common critique, and I read it and I see it and I've experienced of education, is that we don't prepare people for jobs. We spend a lot of time and we don't prepare them for jobs. Well, the cool thing about WID and our working with our business partners who help us is that we make sure we prepare people for jobs to actually go do the work. And our friends and our partners with Mutual of Omaha have really helped us to shape a code school along with our amazing instructors who are such talents in their fields. But for both Mutual of Omaha employees who are being developed and open enrollment students who join Code School, it is in that relationship with Mutual of Omaha that we're able to put forward a program that when you leave, you can get a job and you'll be ready to do that job. So thank you, Mutual of Omaha. Specifically, Shauna Dorsey, Chris Zabronic started with us way back in cohort 1. Bob Herrera has joined us in cohort 2 and is helping to support the work that that you all, Mutual of Omaha, are doing with your employees, and we in turn are doing with them. And I also understand Dean Frazee, if I'm saying that correctly. If I'm not, I do apologize, who is an incredible recruiter at Mutual of Omaha. So special shout out to the 4 of you and all of our Mutual of Omaha guests who are here. Finally, then, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Herrera to say a few words on behalf of Mutual of Omaha. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Colin. This has been a great relationship with Metro Community College. When we started working and meeting with Tom and Art, this has just blossomed for us. And so we're very excited to be a corporate partner with Metro. And in fact, I just was contacted a couple of weeks ago by another company that was asking me for my opinion on the Code School. And I didn't have anything negative to say. So hopefully you will be getting another corporate partner reaching out to you, to the faculty, to the advisors at the school. I want to thank you for all of your efforts. To the graduates, thank you for the efforts that you've put into the program. I know it's been tough working and going to school, so that shows us a commitment. And we very much appreciate you taking that time out of your personal schedule to further your professional development. And to the mentors, the managers, senior management at Mutual, again, appreciate everyone's support of this program. And I look forward to seeing what all these graduates have in store for them in their career. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I think I'm next according to the itinerary. Hey, everybody. I'm Matt Payne. I'm a computer programmer. And I'm going to try to share my screen because, you know, slides make everything better. So I hope you can see these slides now because they're just amazing. They're MCC Code School's overview, the cohort 2 edition. Software development is a team sport. Everyone learned that in their bones this time around. It's so heartwarming, all the amazing things that happened. And these amazing things happen through the common technical vehicles of Spring Boot and Angular. People started off with the basics, learning the Java and the HTML, and everything built up from there. It was definitely not a box cake. And as people will tell you, there were merge conflicts. And if you're not familiar with merge conflicts, ask any one of these new developers about them later. And, you know, they'll tell you some stories, maybe twitch a little as well. So at the beginning of the 9 months last September, we started off on our very first week talking about the agile mindset so that if you're stuck going this way, you can think, is there another way to still accomplish the goals and add value? And that came in handy many times throughout the cohort. After that, we launched into some of the technical staples of our web development world, HTML, cascading style sheets, Git on the command line. People were allowed to use Git in other venues as well, such as VS Code and IntelliJ, of course, Freedom. And we use IntelliJ for the Java because that's what's popular these days. We did some test-driven development and testing in general with JUnit, went through SQL, and we took all of that and we made a nice project out of it in the spirit of Jekyll and Gatsby and Eleventy. We wrote a simple static site generator that would read in a large quantity of data that was in JSON, JavaScript object notation, insert it into a database, and then programmatically generate hundreds and hundreds of web pages in order to allow people to browse a movie site where they could search, find movies on genre or actor or title of the movie itself. After that, in the second quarter, the second program increment, the Spring Framework was introduced, complete with the joys of inversion of control and dependency injection, the mysterious auto-wired annotation. And then people start to see just how dramatic things could be when you use Spring Boot to get things done quickly. For example, writing a web app in Spring Boot, you can have controllers to turn it into a web app that serves up HTML. You have other controllers that serve up just the API using the REST style. putting common business logic in services so we can have thin controllers, and those services reach out and deal with the entities in the database using JPA. When you need something extra, you can just edit your build.gradle file, and Gradle will follow the transitive dependencies and come on in. Timeleaf is a pretty easy to learn templating language that's dovetails nicely with Angular, so we use that. Showed people social logins, such as logging in with your GitHub credentials or your Google credentials. And then we reimagined the entire static generated website, this time as a dynamic database driven website with some security. So you had to be in a certain class of people in order to go to certain pages, and the general public didn't even have to log in. Wow. So then in Q3, Angular comes in, and TypeScript, which is JavaScript plus types, and people started writing Angular components, Angular services. They learned about different ways to manage state, routing. When the URL changes, how can we go to a different set of components? Made it look marvelous with material from Material UI from Angular. And they also worked on interacting with RESTful services on the server side through HTTP. And for project, they built a Twitter competitor where people sent husks, not tweets, Husker. It's better than that West Coast stuff. Having done all of these projects for each of the first 3 quarters in small groups, it was time for all 8 developers to come together in a self-directed agile project team. And this project was amazing. Every 2 weeks, we would have a demonstration, a retrospective, and some planning. And in the end, this team wrote almost 11,000 lines of code. They've been doing a little bit since I wrote these slides, so we'll just call it 11,000 lines of code. 5,000 lines of Java with 35 tests, 12 custom Angular components. Just amazing. There were 152 Angular pull requests for the Angular side of the project and 74 on the Spring Boot side. That's a phenomenal amount of work. They all can tell the stories. It's fantastic. So to tell you more and to talk to each of the developers, here's Russ, one of our fabulous corporate trainers.
Hey, thanks, Matt. So I'm Russ. So I worked with them by the time they got to increment 3 and 4. I was also joined by Kiki and Ravi, who are in attendance today, as well as Ian and Kathy and Eric, who helped supplement a lot of the agile methodologies and ceremonies for these increments. It was really awesome to see them come by the 3rd increment because they had picked up a whole lot of programming concepts and processes, and we were able to hit the ground running, especially using a framework like Angular, which is kind of an enterprise level framework, very familiar. If you're familiar with Java, it was kind of the concepts coming into TypeScript, and Angular was pretty familiar with them. We had originally rewritten this course from the previous year and had about 6-7 weeks worth of content. They were so fast in how they adopted best practices and different concepts within JavaScript itself, so fast at picking it up that by the 3rd week, we overtook everything we had planned. And so we started just adding on to those concepts and kind of going off the cuff and pushing them further and harder. This was a brilliant class to sit with and to watch them grow. So we started with the Husker app, which was our Twitter clone. They learned a lot about components and data binding, communication between components, messaging, stateful services, and all sorts of cool concepts on building this greenfield project from 0 lines of code to the final project where they had thousands of lines of code. So it was pretty cool to watch that whole process. I'd like to talk more, but I kind of want to get to showing off everything they've done. But before that, Eric and Kathy are kind of going to talk through some of the more process-oriented features that we completed throughout this course.
Yeah, so can everybody see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so getting into kind of the final project, we really were aiming to simulate a real world experience, right? I think it was kind of brought up at the beginning. I think Don mentioned how, that's one of the things that really sets this program apart, is that it's not just about learning how to write code or how Java works or how Angular works, but like Matt mentioned, right, it's a team sport. And so part of that is learning how to work together on a team, which is where a lot of the agile concepts come in. And for the final project, we wanted to simulate this real world development team, and we built an app completely from scratch, right? So they started off by instantiating 2 empty repositories for Java and Angular. We built this out using those frameworks, as well as leveraging a little bit of Amazon Web Services. Deployed it through Docker. We were able to give the students a little bit of an overview of some CI/CD DevOps kind of stuff. It wasn't necessarily littered into everything they did every day. We wanted to make sure they had the concepts and they understood how an application would be deployed in the real world. And then they're also going to show you some of the really awesome stuff they did with the UI UX concepts as well. So the main thing to get the project started was we wanted to do something that the students were really passionate about. I think a lot of folks really enjoyed doing the Husker app. It was something everybody could kind of relate to. And one of our main goals for the final project was it was something we didn't want people to have a whole lot of domain knowledge on. And we wanted to try and find a type of project that had a wide range of features to where 8 students could potentially be working on things without stepping on each other's toes and editing the same files every day. I'd say different parts of the project, we had varying degrees of success with that. But I think everybody really enjoyed it. So one of the other challenges with this whole cohort being virtual the entire time due to COVID was how do we best collaborate with things that in traditional agile projects are usually done around a whiteboard. And so we leveraged tools like Miro, and Kathy will talk a little bit about Metro Retro to try and have some collaborative sessions online where the students could work together and share things and make sure that we're all not just talking to each other, but talking with each other. And so we threw up this little crowdsourced voting Miro board to kind of just brainstorm ideas on what they wanted to build for their final app. And then everybody did a dot vote to kind of whittle down the top ideas. Funny enough, we made it to the good ideas section, and then we had a dead tie, and we got into quite a long standoff between the two. And then from nowhere, the new idea emerged, which hadn't even been on the initial list, which was for the recipe-based app, and that ended up being the one that won out. So Kathy's going to talk a little bit about the agile planning and the execution of the project here, and then I'll talk a little bit about the architecture before we get the team kicked off here.
All right, thanks, Eric. So day one, we all came together and did a big project planning. We kind of went through all of the pieces and parts of the app and kind of came together trying to figure out what were the biggest features we wanted to get out of this application. So the first part was Eric and I kind of took the role as product owners for this, kind of similar to how you would in a real development team. We laid out some of the key features that we wanted within this recipe app and ordered them based on MVP, high priority, and what are kind of the nice to haves. From there, we decided how to build out our first mock-up together. So we came up with this very basic UI design, but kind of wanted to at least get it down on paper what we were looking to have built. And so that's what you can see in the middle there with our very, very basic UI design on day one. And on the right, we also kind of needed to figure out how are these requests going to update the database with all of these recipes and nutrition information. And so we mocked out just a basic API request structure for adding a recipe to a database. So that is what you can see there. And from there, we got into our regular sprint cadence. So we used the Scrum sprint cycle. So every 2 weeks, we did daily stand-up. We also did a sprint planning and a sprint demo at the very end, kind of showing off all of our work as a team. And so you can see there, we used Jira to track all of our tasks, which was really nice. It allowed us to see what everyone was kind of working on and collaborate and figure out who needed to help with certain pieces of the project at any given time. And then one of my favorite parts about Agile project management is the retrospective. So the team came together every sprint at the end kind of analyzed how they thought it went, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do better as a team. And the final thing that you can see there is actually from this fun app called Metro Retro. At least I think it's fun, where everyone kind of jumps in this browser-based app and kind of gets to write their own Post-it notes there. So these were our action items from our very last sprint, which was make sure we have actual recipe data in there to populate this great app. So that is how we executed this project. And next up, Eric is going to talk about the overall architecture of the app.
Yeah, so just like simulating a real world project and how the app was developed, we wanted to try and simulate, or at least give the team some insight into how a project is deployed in a lot of common situations, and especially some more modern ones. So we leveraged Amazon Web Services for most of the architecture here to get the app out and running. So we're using Amazon's Route 53 DNS routing from day one. Kathy and I did a DevOps overview during the Husker app days on how to use Jenkins and whatnot. And we had Jenkins running inside a Docker container on a virtual machine out in Amazon. And then here for the final project, we got the apps to start deploying out inside Docker containers. So the middle section there shows kind of the two virtual machines that we had running throughout the last project here. And the one EC2 there has all the Docker containers of the app running. We didn't end up separating out into dev and prod as we 100% intended, but the project is postured to do so should we want to. And then we have we're using Amazon's container registry to manage the Docker images that get deployed out to the server. Ryan's going to talk a little bit later about what that whole CI/CD pipeline looks like. And then also Kale is going to show off a pretty awesome late feature that was kind of a stretch goal for us, which ended up being hosted out in GCP, which is a little Python app doing some machine learning type stuff, but I won't steal his thunder too much on that. So yeah, then Russ, I think, is going to talk to us just a little bit about some of our initial database schemas, and then we'll kick it over to the team.
Yeah, so rolling into the final project, knowing we were making this recipe app, we knew that this was a very data-heavy and data-driven application. In fact, you can't have a recipe app unless you got recipes, and you can't have recipes unless you can somehow submit those recipes and create collections of recipes and these sorts of things. So before we got to actually committing code, we sat down and really talked about what is our data? What does our data look like, and how does that data relate to each other? And so this is an example of a schema that we came up with. And this was a living document. As we made changes, we tried to update this accordingly throughout time. And this was around about the end of class where we came to this. And what was great was that this allowed the developers on the teams to communicate to each other, because, you know, as most development teams, you kind of self-organize. And so we had folks that were really heavy on the back-end development within Java, folks that were really heavy on the front end. And we tried to mix that up as best as we can, you know, obviously, but people had bigger pieces of the pie in certain places naturally. And then we had two students who you'll hear from later, Jackie and Jordan, who kind of self-organized as our UX and UI team, and they helped coordinate with the others. So as we were generating wireframes and all these things, which Jackie and Jordan are going to show you, we sat down with the rest of the team and really talked about this data. So, you know, throughout the course of development, we had this domain-driven language that we could communicate with each other, and we knew exactly, you know, what the Java side was doing and the front end side was doing, and how we needed to bridge the gaps to talk to each other, you know, to talk to those systems talking to each other. So it really helped us along the way, and also helped with conflict or deconflicting problems. Maybe somebody thought something worked a certain way, but you know, the other people didn't think that it was supposed to work that way. These types of schemas and diagrams really help unify the team as a whole and keeps everybody on track. So we're going to talk more about this later. There's a student that's going to really want to dive into this in detail. So from here, I think we're going to get into our project demo, and we're going to introduce you to our final project. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Oh, can't hear you, Jake. It doesn't look like you're muted, but you definitely have no volume. There we go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Had to open my Mac. There we go. Cool. My name is Jake. I'll be walking through the app. One quick thing, my dog might bark if there's a sudden noise, so I really hope he doesn't for sake of your ears. So I'll jump into this though, and I do want to preface this too. I don't want to show too much like logic or talk about logic or functionality too much because we'll kind of dive into that individually too. So just kind of want to show you what we've all worked on. So here is our login page of our app, and I'll just do a quick demo and show off some functionality. And I'll start with our OAuth process, and begin with my email here. Grab my password. Oh, might have to manually do it. This is great. This is one part I wasn't able to test because I didn't want to use an account that was already used, and our database is persistent. So there we go. Great. Logged in. We are prompted first to make a username that's used throughout the app. So I want to show off one piece here where we have some validation. Let's see here. I think I have to refresh once. There we go. Well, you know, demo gods seem to not be nice today, but generally to be some validation here that says taken. There we go. So I had to hit the button. So username already taken. I'll create mine. My name is Jake. Great. Sign up. And here you'll be directed to our home page, which has a list of recipes. And really here, I just want to kind of show off our design because it's really cool, I think. Starting with our nav bar here has a link that can take you back to the home page anytime. We have a search, which I'll come back to. It's a little notification icon, your profile, and there's a little drop down for some of these options here. Profile again, account settings, help and support, log out. And then you'll see here, we kind of just list through all of our recipes and keep scrolling and kind of browse as you like. One piece that we wanted to make sure we incorporated into the app was mobile-friendly options, which you can kind of see work as we collapse the screen and these shorten down. But I also want to actually look at what an iPhone 10 looks like. And you can kind of see, if you notice that hover on the screen before this iPhone view, you would hover on it. But in mobile, we know that there's not a hover. So we wanted to incorporate a way to still get to this little collection piece that I'll touch on a little bit later too. So you'll still see that button, but it'll actually appear on the card itself. So you can kind of scroll down, and you'll also notice that that nav bar, you know, you still have this drop down here, this link to home, but also you get this little floating snack bar, which is pretty neat, where you still have these options to search, and then this is actually add a recipe, user profile, notifications. And that add recipe is right down here on the home page too, and that just kind of floats there. So from there, I want to show you what viewing a recipe looks like. So if we click this first recipe, we get this nice little page where you have kind of all the information you can need. We have an image. You can go over here to nutrition, which we'll kind of speak on later in our individual pieces, but this actually works with API calls that we make that kind of compute this and feed it back to the recipe. And here we have like name, prep time. We have our categories in the form of chips, and we've got ingredients that you can kind of check. And interesting here where you can actually like add to a shopping list. I did actually notice this today for the first time. Props to design folks. That little check is actually a little transition that actually shows a little check animation. I think that's pretty neat. And then instructions we see here. You can actually step through the instructions as you're making it and cross them off, which is very handy. So I think that's just about it for this, but I do want to show mobile view again, which I think looks super clean on here. We have the little toggle here for image and nutrition. And as we kind of click and drag down with your finger, you can imagine, we still have this like button, And then here's our collection button as well, which I'll showcase in a little bit. So same kind of info. Text is nice and a little smaller, so it fits on the screen a bit better. And we still get this floating snack bar. From there, I can showcase our search. I'll go back to the home screen. And so here's our little search pop-up. And here you can kind of search through our whole catalog of recipes. Here the search is by kind of generally through recipe title, category, and ingredient. So you can kind of put in a search here, and you'll kind of notice as you search, we get a little bit of filter action that filters through if you want to browse by categories and browse by ingredients. So we'll search pizza, and you'll kind of see there are categories of pizza. So we know that something's going to pop up. So we'll search all, and we actually get a couple results. Not sure if pizza was an ingredient on pepper steak or what, but came up anyway, so that's interesting. I'm curious to see what that looks like. But I'll actually go back to home and give a refresh so our search is nice and fresh here. And I do want to show off just clicking on one of these categories after you filter. So you can actually click on pizza. And oh wow, okay, so great. This homemade, the best homemade pizza pops up. And you'll kind of notice this this changes based on how you search too. If you search generally, it'll show like results by your search term. Here it shows category, and then if you were to search by ingredient, it would show that as well. From there, I'll lead us to user settings, which we can go to right here. It's just a little nice page, has some nice effects with some click downs. You can actually change your display name here and save that. We can go down to collapse that, notification settings, and we get some toggles. We're not necessarily, we don't have notifications at the moment, but we do have a way to kind of store this preference. So I can save that just to confirm that that actually comes through. Go back to account settings, and sure enough, it is saved. And here we just have kind of general filler for the terms and privacy, health and support. So from there, I do want to show user profile. Let's go, that'll be right here. So you can see here, which is kind of cool. It actually pulls in that Google OAuth profile picture and puts it on our website. You do have the option to change that back there on the user settings if you'd like. And here's a place where our recipes would be had we made any. And I'll show off recipes showing up there in a little bit after I add one. And collections is interesting too. This gives the user ability to kind of click on a recipe that they either search for, find on home, and then that you can either add to your favorites, which is always there, or you can add a new collection. Say you want to make a collection of dinner recipes, and you can sure do that. From there, I will actually do this. So we'll call this pizza, just like we kind of had before. We don't have an image currently, that's okay. So here we have pizza, great. And let's see, I will go back home and maybe let's do this search again. So pizza, cool. Oh, actually, let's actually use, there was one specifically that I wanted to try. Oatmeal, there it is. Let's do oatmeal. So great. Let's look at here, click this, add a collection. We'll actually add this to favorites. So we'll add that recipe. Great. Go back to our profile, go to collections, let's click on favorites. Nope. Here, let's add one for cookies. Cool. Okay. Let's go back, refresh. Awesome. Go. Let's try this one more time. Cookies, and it's not there. So maybe demo gods weren't as kind on this one, but you would see this collection here added had that been working. So we'll go on to inputting a recipe. which we'll show here. That's just a nice little pop-up here where we have, we'll touch on this bit in a little bit. We'll kind of use that as a big finale because it's a pretty cool piece of functionality, but we'll input a recipe manually. I'll just do mac and cheese. Actually, I'm gonna put Jake's mac and cheese. Take some ownership, and I'm gonna grab a picture really quick that I found of my recipe. So I'll grab that URL, come back here. Awesome. Cook time, it's only gonna take a minute. Prep time, 2 minutes. Instructions, put stuff in oven. Great. And then we're gonna cook food, sweet. And let's do one more, eat food. Sweet, simple instructions. We'll actually say, let's eat this food first. How about that? That makes a lot of sense. So we'll do that. And I accidentally did kind of show off this functionality, but you will see you can kind of click and drag as you go. You can also have the option to delete. But here I did show off accidentally by clicking this. If you click on one, you can actually edit it. So let's do cook foods. So you'll see that edits, and it comes down here. And then we can show deleting one as well. Great. Ingredients, cheese for sure. Let's do 1 cheese. And we'll actually do 1 pound of cheese. Great. Yum. So we'll go over here, noodles. Quantity 3. Let's do 3 pinches of noodles. Seems about right. For categories, this is kind of an interesting bit of functionality as well. We'll see that all our categories that we have in here, cast iron is apparently a category of food, but we also have like chocolates, and some of these are just random words that we pulled in from an English dictionary. But let's do a dessert, because we all know mac and cheese is a good dessert. And you also have the option to add some notes here. So we'll just add some notes. And that comes in a little dark, but that's all right. So cool, we've added this. Let's go ahead and add that. It takes us right to this page, which is nice and handy. We see all the data that I entered in here. And maybe we'll try this again. We'll add this to pizza and see if this works now really quick. We do see my recipe is showing up now, which is great. Let's add it to favorites too. All right, let's check these. Nope, no. Back. Definitely wasn't in cookies. Pizza. Hey, okay, it showed up in pizza. So we know one of them's working. So there's that functionality for that collection where you can add to a list of favorites or whatever your custom collection may be. I did want to showcase one last thing on the input recipe, where we have this URL here, where you can actually just input a URL from a recipe that you found online and potentially have this input it for you, which is very neat. So I found a really good baked buffalo wings recipe, and I love buffalo wings, so I'm going to click that. And if we give it just a second, boom, there we see some inputs that are pre-filled with times from that website. And I'll pull up that website just so you guys can see that I'm not just yanking your chain. This is real functionality. So here's the website pulled in from Dinner at the Zoo. We see a nice little picture there. And if we scroll down through this, I'll have you trust me that the data is actually from that page. And we have a nice little API machine that one of us, Kale, built that's very cool that can kind of scrape that from these websites. And he'll talk more about that later. But so these are cool. You can say maybe you want to do this step before another, and we don't want celery sticks, so let's just get rid of that instruction. Ingredients, I'm going to delete these just because it does break, because 1.5 isn't a long, and actually we do have a long in category, so I'm going to delete those just so those don't come back and haunt us. Delete that one for good measure. Cool, so we got our recipes here, or our ingredients, categories pulled in, awesome. So let's go ahead and add that as well. So you'll see that comes through with that image. Nutrition doesn't come through quite yet on some of their new recipes, but you'll see kind of just as all our other recipes came through, this one comes through as well with categories and all. And I think that just about wraps it up.
Great job, Jake. Thank you for taking us through that. So next up, we have our 5-minute tech talks from each of the students. And Matt Johnson is going to kick us off with expanding models, reactive forms, and the ERD. Take it away, Matt.
Thank you. All right, let me share my screen here first before I start us off. I hope this doesn't count as my 5 minutes. All right, here we go. So you saw this in the presentation earlier, but I just wanted to bring up our relationship model here to show we did this not in our first iteration, which was basically based on just getting an app on the ground, that there was something there to work with. This was what we did, I think, as we got into our second iteration, and was, I cannot stress enough, instrumental into us being able to do this process. Because, you know, it's one thing to think of there and be like, oh, we have the recipes, going to need instructions and ingredients and yada, yada, yada. And another thing to lay out how this actually worked. As you can see here, you know, we point to like how each piece is related to another piece in it. You know, how is user related to collections? How is it related to the user recipes, which is related to the recipes, which is, you know, how you get it. You can see here, these are basically our join tables that are created for instructions, ingredients, categories, user recipes, collections as well, which then leads into the models for the parts that make up a recipe. This was, again, I don't know what to say because this is more mind area than it is like a technical coding thing, but it was super important and also very important when it came to certain levels of necessary improvisation. You can see here ingredient was right here has content, quantity, measure, and of course ID as part of its qualities. Originally, we were just having it as string while the rest of it looked very much like it does right now. But as we got further into developing this, and when it came to both like what we were building and what was necessary to be able to function with the nutrient entity at all, and also what would be good from like a user perspective and pulling data down, we decided that was too simple. And even though we hadn't planned how ingredient looks like this at the time, the fact that we had built everything else out meant it was a simple process of going into first the back end, building out you know, the objects further, making sure they're related, you know, that everything gets transferred through our DTOs, and then from there the front end was just the logical, you know, expansion of that. And we wouldn't have been able to do it if we hadn't spent this much time building it out. So this planning, in a way, facilitated our ability to improvise as well when it was necessary for the good of the app. Now, the part of the app that I probably spent the most time with was this input recipe form. I also want to shout out to Jake and Rob, who also spent some time with it, and they'll probably talk about their pieces on it when they get to their parts. As you can see here, I built out this recipe. Jake already showed off pretty much how you set it up and send it off and all that. But I just wanted to give an overview here. This seems very simple right here, but behind the scenes, it is at least complex, like it would take time to read through it and understand. I think it's kind of genius because a lot of these things, particularly instructions and categories, are forms within forms. We have the master form that is, you know, this is the recipe, that's what we compile together to make the recipe object that we send to the API and yada yada. But to do that, we actually have like a separate form here, like this add instruction is a form. So just do a thing that, when I press enter, adds it into the actual form object that then gets submitted. And there's like technically a couple other steps, but we'll run out of time if I explain the whole thing. Same thing for ingredients here. And in fact, it's also made to, when you edit something, pops it back into the original form. So what you're doing is you take a thing from one form, put it into the final form to submit. But if you go back to edit, you pull it out of that form and put it in here. This also is smart enough to recognize the IDs of particular items. So if this is a recipe you've already saved, it's not going to erase the ID. So you're not going to be populating your database with like dead end stuff. You go in here, you make the edit, it's the same ID. This one doesn't have an ID because I haven't submitted it yet, but for a saved recipe it would. And everything keeps its place. And the same way here, keeps its place in line, keeps the ID, that sort of thing. So we go ahead and we add this recipe. It routes immediately to the page that we have, which is very nice. You can see here, all of this information is here. Because this is my recipe, there's an edit button. I don't know if Jake touched on that. But what I want to come back to and submit or bring you back to in here is just that, once again, everything is perfectly preserved because we have it on the back end. The order gets sorted, and we have just like very carefully constructed this to rebuild everything out just through a series of like, once again, that form movement where it's like, this is the object, it recognized these parts of the form, send it out there. So it all happens very seamlessly. In fact, it even updates as you add stuff. So I'll say easy, and you'll see, you probably couldn't see it in the background, but this actually was updated before I even submitted. So I think I've already gone over my time, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to, I believe, Jordan and Jackie.
Well, I do want to stop you real quick, man. I know we're maybe a couple minutes over, but
sure.
You did a lot of work that communicated with the back end and coordinating with different user or different developers. What was your big takeaway this process that you're leaving here with all the work you've done? What is the biggest takeaway as a developer?
Biggest takeaway as a developer, from a more non-technical standpoint, planning, and then, of course, communication, which sounds very obvious, but I think, especially if, you know, I think a lot of developers, myself included, might have some social anxiety and stuff to work through, but it's very important to work with that. The planning allowed us to work separately, but then the communication and working together, especially when there was like myself and Rob and Jake all touching the same input form at the same time, when we were pair programming, allowed us to both catch each other's mistakes and code more efficiently, because we were allowed to put these things together in a way that would create minimal merge conflicts, where otherwise at the start of the process, when we weren't as cohesive as a team, that was a little bit bumpier.
Yeah, yeah. Communication is one of the hallmarks of a high-performing team, one of many. So that's great. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
All right, and next up we have Jordan Clark doing style guides and shared components.
All right, thanks, Kathy. I'm going to see if I can successfully share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. So one of the first things that Jackie, Jake, Kayla, and I did was to come up with a style guide for the app. So we chose our colors for our theme. You know, what is our app going to look like? We chose the different components that were going to be used. We used Angular material as our framework for our design. So we chose the button, and not only did we show kind of an example of what it looks like, we gave our other devs the HTML, CSS, and any TypeScript that was necessary for that button to work inside the app. We designed a card, same thing. We have the actual code that is needed. I know Jake did a lot of work on this input. And then we also picked a font that was implemented on the global styling for the app. So there was no decision that had to be made by the other developers. That was all just set and didn't have to be worried about. Jackie's going to talk a little bit about our wireframes, but that was kind of our mid-level design that we provided folks, kind of a mock-up of the site. So we also provided that here on the style guide. So everything that everyone needed was all in one place. And then in addition to the style guide, we also created some shared components, and the Teams thing is in the way. A good example of those shared components is this recipe card. As you saw when Jake was going through the app, this recipe card is used throughout the app on profile, collections, and obviously here on home. So we created a card component that could just be implemented in these other places without any other code having to be written on that for that card. So that saved, I think, our devs a lot of time when we were, creating our different components. And then also the dialogue. So you saw when Jake was signing in, and some of the collection stuff, those are all shared components that could just be implemented within another component really easily, saving everyone a lot of time.
And then in addition to getting really comfortable with mobile-friendly design, I started diving into accessibility towards the end of the project. And one example of that is here on the home page. So you can actually, on the app, tab through and interact with the page. So if I wanted to add this orange peanut tofu satay, whatever, I can actually pull this up and add it from my keyboard. So that was kind of a really cool thing to learn for me. And I really enjoyed that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for my piece.
Thank you, Jordan.
That's great, Jordan. Yeah.
Russ, did you have anything to add?
Once Jackie finishes, I'm gonna address both of them.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. So next up we have Jackie Bogard, who is going to talk to us about wireframes and the settings page code.
Okay. Okay, so as you guys seen in the demo, these are all of the wireframes. Jordan and I spent a lot of time, probably I think the first sprint mainly, getting these wireframes out there. She mainly did a lot of the mobile while I took most of the desktop. I don't want to go through each one because it's a lot of screens and most of them are the same, but I will just highlight a few differences because the style did change throughout the design and throughout the entire project. So if you see the recipe cards here, so originally we did want to have the we wanted to have the save to collections, which we do have, and we also wanted to have comments, but we didn't have enough time to be able to add in the likes and comments. So instead, we just decided to go with a more sleek version and get rid of the underlying card, and then just put that hover effect like you've seen in the demo to be able to save to collections. So that was one change. The rest of them are pretty much the same. We also have another thing that we wanted to be able to eventually get to that we ran out of time, was to be able to add to a weekly planning. So if you found a recipe, you could save it to Monday meal 1, 2, or 3, all the way through the week. And then from there, that would have generated a grocery list, and you could check off each grocery list. So then once you go to the store, you can already have it pre-made for you for that meal prep for the entire week. So that would have been another feature that we wanted to add. But overall, yeah, we spent a lot of time just getting all of these out here. Like I said, it's a bunch of screens. It's the entire app, so I don't want to go through the entire thing. But another main piece that I did work on that we showed a bit in the demo was the settings page, which I want to show you a little bit in more detail. So here's the settings page. And the way that we use this was with a matte accordion. And nested inside of matte accordion, we have matte expansion panels, which is what opens up each panel. And then this is what Jake showed, how you can update notifications. Again, this is something that we didn't fully get done, but we had it set up to where whenever we were ready to add in notifications, the settings would be updated to where you can get notified or you cannot. And then we have just terms and privacy. And then lastly, we have a form for help and support that you will be able to send a message to answer any questions. So then one thing I do want to show, naturally, when you come in, you only have a username as you've seen, but once you get into the settings, so I'll go first to my profile. This is only the username. You can go to the settings page and you can add a display name as well, but it's not required. So you can not have one, but if you do have one, it has a minimum characters of 3, maximum of 50. So it stops you. You can see it counting over here in the corner and it stops you at 50. And then if you have just two characters, it gives you that error that you must contain at least 3. And it also disables that save button, and it doesn't allow you to do that. So if I just actually update it, I can save it and it tells you your settings or your changes have been saved. You go back to the home, your profile page, and now it displays the display name. So just to show off a little bit of that code. Oh, there we go. So like I said, we use the matte accordion and then nested those expansion panels. So then we put a form inside of here to be able to do that edit profile page. And then the main functions in here were the cancel, if you wanted to cancel and revert your changes, which you see here. So it's telling you to get the previous display name, just setting it to whatever display name it was previously. And then we also have the update profile on submit here. And this is saying If it is valid and if it is sturdy, meaning there's any changes, then that's when you go into this function where you get the user and then you get the user display name. And then that's where you set the user display name to whatever was set on here. And then we use that HTTP client to call the put method to be able to actually update and then subscribe to it. And then this is where we see the snack bar that popped up that your changes have been saved, as well as actually saving that data. So I believe that is everything that I have.
It's great work. Jackie and Jordan kind of self-organized into our UX and our UI team and drove a lot of what we see, or most of what we've seen in the application. There's a saying that design drives functionality. Developers hate hearing that, but it really is true, because once I come in as a developer, or anybody else, any other developer, and we start writing code, it becomes a very expensive process to have to refactor or to pivot in order to match the customers or the user's expectations. Because sometimes I'm a developer, but I don't know exactly how the user is expecting their experience to be on the app. And that's where UX and UI becomes a very important part of this process. These two looked at recipe apps, they documented amongst themselves, made these wireframes, the component libraries, the design library. Not only did it meet and went over our expectation as users, us, the instructors and other students, it blew us away, but it gave the developers a guiding light, a direction for the rest of this work. And there was not a lot of guesswork. And when there were changes, it was awesome to see them on their own without us being the instructors prodding them, but going out to Jackie and Jordan saying, hey, I'm thinking about, this particular feature. I think I might need something for that front end. How should this fit in, or how does this work? And they were able to work that within the wireframes and communicate that back to the team. It was literally like, I'm very fortunate in my workplace where we very much value that design process and what it brings to the team and to the users. It blew me away to see them doing that right on their own without much instruction. Very talented team, the both of them, very bright with this stuff. I can't say enough about how awesome it was to see you guys working with the wireframes and components and all these things with the team. That was truly something. So I appreciate it and thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ.
Mm-hmm.
Very good work. All right. So next up, we have Jake Weisenthal, who's going to talk to us about input recipe logic and design, the search bar, and get all recipes controller method.
Just when you thought I was gone, here I am again. So yeah, Kathy, do you have that presentation by chance for those slides?
Eric is starting to share it now.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so I just want to talk through some of the cool stuff that I was proud of learning throughout this experience. So I did want to start with integration testing. Part of what I worked on was a little bit of the API magic in our backend to add a recipe or update a recipe, so our post and put mappings. And here we'll actually look at a put mapping test that I wrote, which I thought was really kind of interesting. My favorite part being the last little bit where it's expect a specific, or maybe not so specific, but looking in the ingredients array and looking for where content equals tater. So anyway, I just found that really cool that you could kind of look through an array inside a JSON string. So that was really interesting. We did a lot of testing. I think it really held our app together because we eventually implemented the ability to, whenever we deployed our app, that it would run through all the tests that we wrote. So some of the tests we wrote, I think, kind of helped us stay on path so that if we were to change, which this did happen, change part of our entities or DTOs, that we'll kind of catch that right away and know what's broken on this test so that we can fix it on the front end. So that was really fun to learn. I really enjoyed testing, and testing sounded boring, but it ended up being really fascinating to me. So that's really cool. The next part, if you could advance one slide, was the input recipe front end logic and design, which I spent probably the most time on. So we kind of started there on the left. We had our design, and we were kind of thinking that we would just have a button that added an extra input. But kind of thinking through that, like the design drives functionality, it felt a little bit sloppy, and it made our form huge. So we were trying to think of a way to maybe incorporate a little bit thinner design that still displayed that content. So it is small, but right below that, we do see kind of the wireframe that I built up that kind of shows our ability to add chips to kind of condense that instead of full on inputs. And it also gives like the user a good like broken out view of each of these. And one part I didn't touch on in the demo is kind of the mobile view, which is on that far right, which I was kind of proud of making, which used some Flexbox to stack the ingredient inputs. And then those chips, I think I was worried they were going to look a little bit too big on mobile, but I think it actually flows up pretty well. And you're still able to click and drag those little ordered instructions. Other than that, the functionality I thought was really cool. I really enjoyed some of the programming that I did on this. The logic is really fascinating to me. If you're interested in the code, let me know. I'm happy to share it. It's really cool. But I think the tough parts were finding a way to kind of break up validations inside the form so that, you know, the ingredients, instructions, categories that are all like these arrays of objects, that each of those forms has their own validation, so that you can't input like a ingredient without a name or what have you. And then the whole form as a whole has different validation too. So that was kind of tricky, but fun to work with. And then obviously the click and drag to change order using a map and that uses index to kind of figure out where you want to place that in the order in the array. So that was really kind of a fun time. So anyway, that's all I kind of want to talk about for input recipe. And then the other part, if we can move one more slide, was the search bar, which is the next part I spent some time on. And this one went way quicker because I used a lot of knowledge that I used from the input recipe to this one. So we have some get mapping or get requests that grab our all categories and all ingredients. One thing I wish I would have more time for is to paginate those so it's not so many at one time. But the filter is very cool, where if you search, it kind of filters down to the categories or ingredients you want. I kind of use some inspiration from Spotify. They have this a little bit with their search by artist, song, album, kind of all at once. So that's what I was kind of going off of in my brain. And then you can obviously do your like full search, which uses a custom query in the back end. And actually, if you can click one more, I think it shows that. Yeah, I know this is kind of small, but we have a couple of things. The bottom one kind of shows that custom query in the top where it's selecting all recipes where recipe title is like search term, ingredient like search term, and then category like search term. So that was cool. And that top part is a cool way that I didn't originally build this. It was Kale, but I thought it was really cool. So I wanted to kind of touch on it, where we have one get mapping endpoint that just takes different params in your get request that looks at Q if it's just a user search, a category, ingredient, or user, and then it can give you all recipes based on like category ID of 2 or ingredient ID of 4, and then Q equals any search term, pizza, like I showcased before. So it looks at what you give it, and then it gives your content back to you. So thought that was really cool. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Jake, you really proved to like encompass that whole idea of like the full stack engineer. You went seamlessly between the back end and the front end, and wiring up things very quickly. You were able to grasp a lot of those concepts quickly and implement. And the fact that you love testing, you're going to go to a development team that's going to love you, and you might become the test guy. So careful about that. But what was your, like, out of all the things, I know you learned a whole lot here, but what's your big takeaway going to your team that you want to offer them, or something that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I kind of touched on this in the quote in that presentation that you might have seen right before class, where I just feel like it's kind of like a mindset shift of just kind of knowing where to look in bugs, like searching through like stack traces, feeling comfortable, like knowing what questions to ask when there is a problem, knowing where to look. Those are huge. I mean, once I felt like I had a grasp of that, I felt like nothing was truly in the way, that I could kind of figure it out on my own, or at least have a question in my mind that's that will help someone else get me to that problem. So definitely that. And it's funny you mentioned testing, because it sounds like I'm getting into some of that with work, which there's something about looking at green check marks when they work that is really satisfying. So
Yes, savor it when you get those green check marks. Your curiosity is going to take you very far as a developer, and I'm super excited to see how you grow over time with that, man. You're going to do great. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. All right, next up we have Ryan Rylson with the collections feature and DevOps.
Start sharing here. All right. Hi, everybody. So as Kathy said, I'm going to be doing a little demo over our collection items. So just to kind of get going, I already have 4 out here, as you can see. Even taking stuff as recently as, Jake's demo earlier when he was adding recipes in front of y'all. Those get added into the back end just to prove my point. Getting anything even, pulling in this from his website that he grabbed the URL from, pulls into our collections. I'm going to create a new collection and get some dinner set up. I want this to have a little bit extra flavor, so I'm going to throw in a picture, which, it doesn't, show up super well, but it's an image that I grabbed just off the internet, and that works out pretty well. And we can go back to our main page here and either click into the hover component, or coming into the actual recipe itself, our bookmark here, and add these in. Same code used in both places, and go back to our profile and our collections and take a look at dinner, and we see everybody just loves to have a little bit of bread for dinner sometimes. This was a pretty simple, I guess, idea out the gate. It was just kind of for us to clone a sort of Pinterest type thing, and kind of work from there. Ended up being, I guess, a little more complicated than I thought. Now I'm trying to pull in all the information and send it in one go. But we do got it up and running for the most part. Like I said, there's nothing really too much else to it. As for our DevOps portion, we have our Jenkins set up. So when a student makes a push into our GitLab and it's reviewed, all the merge conflicts are taken care of, and the instructors approve it, it sends out a webhook to Jenkins, and then that cooks off a bunch of our scripts. So once
I
all
can
the
pull up that
tests,
slide for you, Ryan, if you want.
yeah, that works great, Eric. Thank you. So like I said, it kicks off a bunch of our scripts. So those scripts being, whether it's our tests, if any of the tests that we had set up, that Jake was kind of showing off a couple of those. If those fail for any reason, the app won't deploy. So we're not pushing a broken build out for our production environment, I guess, in this case. If it does and it passes, it'll continue to build the site and push that current build out. All the instructions are handled locally in our source code. So that's our Jenkins, our Docker stuff. And then we got a custom deploy.sh as well. And then we have additional environment settings that we had set up in our application.yaml file, again, in our backends. I think that is it for that. Got a nice dive on this in the last week here in class. So it was a lot to take in.
Ryan, so not everything, development is a process. Not everything is always easy. And we had some challenges. All of us had our own challenges. You really put the head down and got to work when you had those problems, and you reached out, you asked the right questions, even, you know, when you didn't know what question to ask, you came to us about that, and really proved that problem solving technique that all of us engineers have of resourcing solutions and trying to find the best solution. What was your big takeaway that you learned from this course moving on as a developer?
Probably just a total change in thinking, I guess. Coming into the class, I was just like, oh, you know, you code and you Google for the right answers and, you know, whatever. Eventually you find them and you just move forward once you find the right answer. It's like, that's not really a great way to think because you get tunnel vision a lot. That's something I think I did a lot. I learned a lot with pair programming, was you'd be with somebody who had a totally different idea of how to solve the issue you were working on. You know, sometimes you come out with the right answer and sometimes the other person comes up with the right answer. You know, and it's usually the difference between you writing 16 or 20 lines of code and the other person figures it out in 16 characters. So, you know, everybody's always got a different view on stuff.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that that's an important skill to take, is figuring out what the best solution is for the project at hand, because we can take forever to come to the perfect solution, but that's going to cost us development time and possibly our customers waiting, right? And sometimes we got to get things. So there's a compromise. And I think you did really well at that. I really do. You did great. I appreciate it.
Very nice work. All right. We've got Rob Shear up next, and he's going to be talking about interacting with APIs and database updates.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Let me get this screen pulled up here. All right, so I spent a lot of time kind of with, like I think Matt mentioned earlier, with Jake and Matt on the input component, but I was utilizing it for another purpose. So let's see here, just for another option. So obviously when you're you have your own account on a recipe app, but somebody else wrote a recipe like this roasted pork tenderloin, so I can't change this. I didn't write it. Some guy named admin probably wrote it. But I did actually write this recipe, or I actually used Kale's awesome API to pull it in. But you can see here, since I am the owner of the recipe, I can actually edit it. So this is kind of what I put a lot of time into, was using Jake and Matt's already kind of like fresh component and adding the logic to it to send any changes via a put mapping on the back end to the database and make sure we can change it. So I could come in here and I could see, well, I think after the last time I ate this, I think we need a little bit more vegetable oil. So, and this is actually something that Matt once again forgot to show off. Matt did a ton of work on making these chips editable, and as easy as that sounds, it's super complicated, and props. So I'm going to add we're going to say 2 teaspoons or tablespoons of there, and we're going to add it back in. Another thing that I worked on was this notes section here to say, well, we want to know if somebody comes to your recipe and it was updated since the last time, you should probably tell the user of your recipe what happened. So there, I still say I added a tablespoon of vegetable. I don't know if I spelled vegetable right. And update recipe. If I had the database up, you could see that it was added. But you can also come down in here, and of course it's a little bit of subscription issues, but there you go. Vegetable oil is now 2 tablespoons, and you can see that the new notes were added. Add a tablespoon of oil. So a lot of that that functionality, it just bounces off of the already stellar design and functionality that Jake and Matt put together, and Jackie and Jordan. I went to them multiple times for where to put this. Do we want this to say recipe notes? That's that collaboration piece. that Russ was talking about earlier is just crucial. I don't think I would have got the result that I had without the team effort that we went through. That's kind of the functionality piece behind it, but behind the scenes here, you can see we have all these controllers and these mappings, but I think the coolest part about the spring situation is just like right here. We have our model, and then we have this, and we just have short annotations and spring identifiers that say this is how we're associating users and the recipes to the collections to all this, and that ERD is where all of that, the spring functionality comes in. So that's what I spent a lot of time with, trying to figure out how to move data around via just updating. So that's pretty much it for me.
Rob, what I really appreciated, so for everybody else, how we, our typical school night, we would have a whole bunch of breakout rooms made, like 5 or 6 of them, and they kind of self-organized and switched between rooms and whatnot. And I would watch that list, and Rob he was like almost like a social butterfly, just going between each of these rooms. And when I would duck into one of them, Rob was talking about them, about what's going on, how does this work, what do we need to do? Okay, we need this. Let me go to talk to this person because they worked on this piece, and let me make sure that I'm bridging the gap here. And like, was constantly floating around, communicating. And I think like it was so impressive to see, and it made a lot of your work really great to review. And going into reviews, I think we learned a lot of valuable lessons about PRs and merges. So what's your big takeaway about that dreaded process? For a lot of new developers, they kind of dread that PR process, a little bit of social anxiety there. What did you learn with that?
With that process specifically, 2 things. Always update whatever you're working on with whatever is latest in develop. Just pull that in, make sure it's all working, fix those merge conflicts before you even request the pull request. And then I also, I think we all said this since the beginning of the class, but it never really settles until you're in this team environment. Small merges, very small. Like you could ruin it with an 87 commit merge, and you're like, oh no.
Right.
But that collaboration piece was so much that I'm pretty sure Jordan and Jackie were switching rooms to get away from me. So
only sometimes.
Nice.
Only sometimes.
Yeah, the small PRs. I hope you guys keep that with you as you move forward. The smaller the PR, the easier it is for everybody on the team to handle. Thanks a lot, Rob. It was awesome.
Agreed. Thank you, Rob. All right, next up we have Calvin Sprague with the nutrient info feature.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. All right, let me share my screen here. So a lot of what I focused on is more on the back end, so it's more walls and lines of code, but I did a little bit of bridging that with the nutritional feature here. I built this out here to where it will grab nutritional information for a recipe based on its ingredients. And then on the back end, it will do an API call to a nutrition website called Spoonacular. So there's a lot of nifty things you can do with that. You can send it the amount, and it will auto-calculate nutritional information for you and send it back. So it is fun to work with, and also kind of a pain trying to get your things to work with the API. So let me kind of show a little bit about how this works. So we have this built inside of a nutritional sticker. Just right now, it's just hard coding different amounts with some tertiary operators to put 0 if for some reason something isn't found. We start off by getting the recipe ID from the URL at the top, and then we send it to get recipe, which gets it from the back end, grabs the nutritional information from that. This does a call to our controller here. It's just nutrition and the ID. Calls this method in our service. Gets nutrition by ID. So it grabs nutrient entities by recipe ID. The nutrient entity is an object that just contains a whole bunch of stuff. It contains names, images, the amount. Like if I had 5 chopped cabbages, right, that would be 5, and then unit would be full cabbages. There's a whole lot of different stuff in here that we didn't quite get to using, but I felt it was nice to have it in there for additional features or future features where we continue to work on this. So from here, from the get, when we get the nutritional entities, it just makes a list of it, sends it back through a model mapper for a DTO, and returns it back to the front end. And that is how these are created. When we initially save it, the idea was for when recipes are saved to have a method after the recipe is saved to go through the nutrients and do an API call for each ingredient individually, but we ran into a little bit of a problem. So the Spoonacular API I was using had a limited API calls for free user accounts, and mine was a free user account for obvious reasons. It gave us something like 150 ingredient calls. So during testing, when you would run the same 4 ingredients maybe a few dozen times, it would definitely start to run out pretty quick. So for just testing and sanity's sake, we only grab the first 3 recipes, and then we add those particular nutrients via those recipe ingredients. And when we bring them back to the front end, I'm losing where I'm at. Here we are. This is where we get the nutritional info. This is where we do the API call for that. Here we have a particular focus, just similar to the front end where we're just filtering by these. We have a focus in our service that just grabs those informations out. It goes through each ingredient, grabs these focused items, pushes them all into an array, and then we reduce that array and sum them up. So if I have calories and cabbages with like 1 calorie and 2 calories, it'll have, calorie 1, calorie 2, adds them up to just one item that says 3 calories at the end of it. And those combined nutrients is what I call them in here, gets returned to the front end, and then we separate them out for viewing purposes in our HTML. And I think that is full circle of the API nutritional information.
I think it was really neat to see that caching can be a pretty advanced concept, whether it be in computer sciences or just programming in general, like caching data that's accessed frequently. And this is definitely a type of application where there's certain data that is accessed frequently. And I think that the solution that you arrived to, I know with the help of Matt Payne, it was really cool to see you implement some sort of caching feature, right? Where you do call that out and you save that as a JSON, and if it already exists, then we retrieve what we have saved.
Yeah, we have we have the fetch ingredient here that goes to, we named it Spoonacular, and then the REST service. This one does very specifically our API calls and our saved database. So we make an item here. We try fetch from disk, which if we have it saved on disk, it will return that information. Otherwise, if it's null, we're going to do an API call to fill in the blanks. And then we will save that to disk. So I'll just show save nutrient, for instance, here. We just do an object mapper, string file format, and we name it according to its nutritional information ID. Spoonacular gives every ingredient an ID, and after that it gives or every recipe an ID, and then its associated nutrients. Then that just saves it as a JSON to a folder here. That's a get ignore, so that way we don't just keep building an endless amount of JSONs into our repo. And then here's the fetch from disk. We just do another mapper and we just read the string value. And then we format it into a nutrient info and return that. So we did that to save on API calls because, again, like I said earlier, we hit the limit pretty quick and started erroring out.
Right.
We I think we left it in develop at one point. So when everyone pulled it down, everyone started running these, even if they weren't working on it. So we had to implement kind of a fix for that too.
I think what was exciting about this whole feature that you worked on was how complicated it was grabbing data from an external API, aggregating that data into nutritional data, and associating that to ingredients, all these other sorts of things. This was an overall completely complicated thing. And, you know, you learned a lot of things saving, you know, file system type things. You've learned the reduce method on arrays and other types of complex operations. I think that it was awesome to see. So again, like everybody else, your biggest takeaway from the efforts that you put in, what are you taking with you as a developer?
Teamwork, 100% teamwork in paired programming. There's a lot of times where I would just, I think Matt called it earlier, just tunnel vision, where I would just focus on one thing for half the class. I'm sitting here going over and over again, you know, I can't figure this one out. It's one line of code. It's got to be a typo. And then I would just jump into a room after I'd hit my head against a wall a few times, finally go, hey, y'all, I need some help. And, you know, someone that sometimes would look in at, sometimes it was you, Russ. I know I leaned on Rob and Ryan every now and then to try and look over my shoulder. Definitely my biggest takeaway is ask for help when you hit a wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no shame in asking for help, and we should. That's the whole part of a team. So I like to say, one team, one fight, right? So awesome. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Calvin. And last but not least, we have Cale Courtney, and he's going to be discussing the recipe parser feature.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Nice.
Yep.
It's a good day. Audio is working. All right. So this was something that we did want originally, like when we first started coming up with ideas for the app. So I'm glad that we got it in at the last second, merged earlier this week. So as you saw, you can just put a link into this input and it will import it. Yeah, so, and then from here, it just acts like a normal recipe. So you can just, you know, do like that and add the recipe. So, you know, behind the scenes, what's happening here is we're making an API call out to this other API that I wrote in Python and hosted on Google Cloud. So this is a UI for it. It's not much, but it does work, and it'll return it right here too. So I just thought maybe I would show too kind of what that looks like. This is like the returned object here. And this is all the data that we're able to parse off of these recipe websites. The reason that, you know, we're able to do that is that a lot of these websites have, you know, a specific type of schema that we're able to just, you know, like search and find and just extract the data. They, for the most part, all use it because Google incentivizes them to do that. So that made it really easy for us. That's really about it. I don't know what else I should show on that. So that's probably good. I don't need to show any back-end code. So
Cale, you should talk about the machine learning aspect.
okay. Yeah, I should.
And what you got from the New York Times stuff to do it.
Yep.
Yeah. So, you know, I even had this tab pulled up here to do that. So thanks for reminding me. You know, well, here I could show this in here. You know, the ingredients that we pull off of these schemas are going to just be like a single string. I cannot find one, but it would
Down,
just, you know,
down just a couple lines. Right
oh,
there.
nice. There we go. So, you know, here's one, for example. This doesn't work for what we're trying to do because we need to map this to an entire ingredient entity. So in order to, A, store that, and B, calculate nutritional information. In order to do that, I implemented a fork of this fella's ingredient phrase tagger. And what this does is, and this is forked from a project that the New York Times took on years back, but what this does is it uses a conditional random field model and parses these strings and provides actionable data. So, as you can see there, when we go to import that, you'll see the difference in our ingredients here. And you can see kind of there's the pipe operator there separating the 3 properties of the ingredient. But over here, you see that it's just a single string. So that was probably the biggest challenge with this, was getting that to A, run inside a Docker container, and B, not be a command line tool and work inside of our Flask app. So that's all I got.
Yeah, good work, Cale. You came
Thank
with
you.
a considerable amount of knowledge already, and went on to do some really incredible things for the applications that we worked on. So your takeaway throughout all this process, work going from the small teams when we did the Husker app to the larger team, working on this app. What's your big takeaway from all of this?
Man, going last is kind of tough because it's all been said. So I think probably, and this was already said, but small commits, small merges. So commit often, merge often. So
Yes,
was not doing that, early on, and yeah, had to deal with a lot of that. So
yes, the small commits, I think, are the small PRs everybody loves. But no, this is awesome work, and all of you should be super proud of everything you've built. It's been such a joy to watch this thing grow from nothing to how many features we got done in the amount of time we had. Just incredible. Thanks.
All right, everyone. So that was the project. I think that's complete. So I'll open it up now. I know we're a little bit over time, but I'll open it up for questions if anyone has any questions.
Real quick, now that the demo is over, I will go ahead and release the URL. If anybody hasn't already stumbled upon it, the app is live. You might find something, but you're welcome to go play. And note that the GitHub sign-in does not work. That was one of the issues we had with deploying it via HTTPS. We never did quite crack that nut, but you should be able to use a Google account if you guys want to go play with it yourselves.
I want to applaud the group of developers. Y'all are amazing. And to the guests helping us celebrate tonight, I want to amplify the fact that there's several different apps at play here. There's the Style Guide app, which is an Angular app deployed to Firebase. There's the recipe grabber that Cale talked about very recently. To have done that as part of the mainstream app would have made it much more difficult and taken a lot more time. So this polyglot microservices architecture that Cale demonstrated with his recipe grabber and that Calvin demonstrated by reaching out to Spoontacular. Bravo, fantastic work.
This isn't really a question, but I just think the amount of teamwork and cohesion that you all have demonstrated just tonight is pretty impressive. And like Russ and others have said, don't forget about that. As you move into your IT career, you will not regret any of that. That's the cool part about this whole program, is what you're going to be bringing into the position that you'll be working in. You're going to not want to just treat it as one and done, but to build off of it and set an example for others on your team. Very, very impressive, all of you.
And I think I want to impart like one of the last things before we all, spread back to where we're going to become developers and whatnot. That it's okay to be wrong, right? The one thing about being in code school is that you're going to make mistakes, and it's expected. It's the school environment or whatever. When you get out to the real teams, I think some people, especially junior developers, get scared, and it's okay to make mistakes because that's how you're going to learn a new skill. It's going to be how you push yourself forward. So don't ever be afraid to do something in your code that breaks locally. That's part of the process, and that's how you're going to learn, right? And then you can make it right. Obviously you don't want to PR stuff that's broken if you can, but don't be afraid to venture out there. Keep that curiosity, keep learning, keep reading, and you guys are going to go super far.
This is
Kim, do you have a
question, Bert.
digital
I just
confetti
wanted
ball
to-
or champagne?
So I have a personal ask before Kim stops recording. So Skip Pascal was one of the founders of Code School. And as those of you who are around during cohort 1 know, I like the shout out to Skip. So can we have a hey Skip?
Hey Skip.
Hey, Skip.
Hey Skip.
Hey Skip.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you everyone for coming tonight, and congratulations to all the students. Thank you, Mutual of Omaha, and thank you to all the instructors. It takes, all of you and the commitment that you have to Code School for this to be a successful program, so we appreciate that. And cohort 3 planning begins now, so that starts in September. So if there are any guests on here that are interested, you can reach out to Don or myself if you have any questions on that. Otherwise, does anyone else have anything to say before we end here?
This is Mike at Mutual of Omaha. I just say congratulations to the graduates, and thank you all for a great presentation, and just very impressive the work that you did here, all that you've learned, and the teamwork that you exhibited. So we're just all very excited for you, and just offer congratulations. Great work.
I don't want to leave. It's been so much fun.
Well, I have one ask of everyone. Everyone probably gets annoyed because I've asked Matt several times to get pictures for me, but I would like to take one picture just for social media. So everyone can smile on the count of 3 and I will take a quick picture. So let me pull this up. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Right. Take care.
Great job.
Enjoy
everyone.
sleeping in Saturday.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Welcome to the
enjoy
club,
Saturday
developers.
morning. Yes.
Thank you.
Good luck.